All right, so today we're diving deep into stress management, and we've got some really cool resources to guide us. We're going to be looking at advice from the NHS, some in-depth stuff from the Mental Health Foundation, and then those actionable techniques from helpguide.org. It's like having a cheat sheet to a calmer and happier you.
And the cool thing is we're really going to break it down, like really dissect stress. You know, what it is, how it sneaks up on you, and why it's so important to get a grip on it.
Exactly. So let's start by defining what this thing is. The Mental Health Foundation, they describe stress as feeling under abnormal pressure. But it's not just any pressure.
Right. It's not your typical, oh, I have a deadline type of pressure.
Yeah.
Think about it. Our ancestors, they had to deal with saber-toothed tigers and stuff.
Yeah.
That was stress too, but it was like these short bursts.
Yeah.
You know, that fight or flight response. But now we're bombarded with stressors 24/7. Work relationships, the news, social media. So it's like our bodies are constantly pumping out those stress hormones with no real outlet.
Yeah.
And that's what really messes with us.
It's like our bodies are stuck in overdrive. No wonder we're exhausted all the time. And I bet that explains all those crazy physical symptoms we hear about. The NHS and the Mental Health Foundation, they talk about sleep problems, tossing and turning all night, sweating, even heart issues. It's not just in our heads.
It goes way beyond just feeling a little frazzled. The Mental Health Foundation, they actually have this checklist of symptoms to help you figure out if you're actually stressed. You might just think, oh, I'm tired. But it could be your body saying, hey, I'm overloaded. But it's not just physical. It messes with your mind too.
Oh, tell me about it. I feel like I'm snapping at everyone. My anxiety is through the roof. And my self-esteem just tanks.
Exactly. And that's what the Mental Health Foundation talks about. How stress can lead to irritability, low self-esteem, even aggression. It's like a domino effect impacting every area of your life.
Okay, so stress is this sneaky, powerful thing. But helpguide.org brings up a really good point. Stress is personal. What stresses me out might not even faze you. So how do we figure out what our triggers are?
Well, they suggest keeping a stress journal. And honestly, I was a little skeptical at first. But it's been so helpful for me. You track those things that set you off, the triggers, and then how you feel and how you react. And you start to see these patterns like, every time my boss does that thing, I reach for the cookies.
I love that. It's like you become a detective for your own stress.
Exactly. And you start to notice those unhealthy coping mechanisms too.
Yeah.
Like helpguide.org talks about. The late nights, snacking, the zoning out on social media, the withdrawing from friends. Sound familiar?
Oh, yes. I think we've all been there. But the point is, once you see the pattern, you can start to change it. And that's where helpguide.org's 4 A's come in, this awesome framework for dealing with stress. Avoid, alter, adapt, and accept.
And starting with avoid, it's not about burying your head in the sand. It's about being strategic, and minimizing unnecessary stress, like learning to say no more often. I used to overcommit all the time and I'd be drowning in stress.
Oh, I hear that. You get that FOMO and you say yes to everything. And then you're totally overloaded. Helpguide.org also talks about setting boundaries with difficult people, being mindful of what you're looking at on social media, and being realistic about those to-do lists.
It's about taking control. But of course, you can't always just avoid stress. Sometimes you got to face it head on. And that's where alter comes in.
So it's about actually changing the situation. Helpguide.org really focuses on communication and behavior here. It's about expressing yourself constructively, but without, blowing up, being willing to compromise, and being assertive when you need to be.
Right. And a big part of that is creating a better work-life balance. That was huge for me. Setting those boundaries between work and my personal life really helped lower my stress levels.
So we've got avoid and alter. What about adapt?
Adapt is all about shifting your perspective. Helpguide.org talks about looking for the silver linings, even when things are tough, and focusing on the bigger picture. Not sweating the small stuff.
It's like choosing to focus on what you can control, even when the world feels like it's falling apart. Helpguide.org also talks about adjusting those super high standards and practicing gratitude. That's a big one for me.
Absolutely. Gratitude can really shift your mindset from negative to positive.
Okay, but what about those situations that you just can't change, like a loss or a big life change? That's where accept comes in, right?
Right. Accepting those things we can't control. Like helpguide.org says.
This is a tough one.
It is tough.
Yeah.
But it can also be so freeing. Helpguide.org has some great strategies for this, like letting go of the need to control everything. which can be so exhausting.
It really can.
And then looking for the upside, even in challenging situations, trying to find that glimmer of hope.
So it's about finding meaning and growth, even in the midst of pain. Helpguide.org also talks about forgiveness, forgiving yourself and others, and just sharing your feelings, talking to a friend, therapist, or even just journaling.
Just getting it out can help so much. So I've got this great foundation with the 4 A's. Avoid, alter, or adapt. Accept. But I'm ready for some action. What are some things we can do, like right now, to combat stress?
Okay, so let's talk about some specific stress-busting tactics.
Well, exercise is always a good one. But helpguide.org makes this point that even small amounts of movement can help.
Like sneaking it into your day, putting on some music and dancing, taking the dog for an extra long walk, choosing the stairs instead of the elevator.
Exactly. Little things add up. And you know what else can really boost your mood? Human connection. Helpguide.org says that face-to-face interaction releases all these hormones that actually counteract stress, like oxytocin and dopamine.
Wait, so just hanging out with my friends can help lower my stress?
It's true. And they have some good tips for strengthening those bonds, like having lunch with a coworker, volunteering, scheduling regular calls with family, even joining a club or taking a class to meet new people.
I love that. It's like building your own stress-busting support system. But it's not just about connecting with others. Sometimes you need to connect with yourself, too. Me time is so important.
Absolutely. Both helpguide.org and the NHS talk about how crucial it is to schedule in fun and relaxation.
But that can be hard sometimes.
It can, but it's so important. For me, nothing beats getting out in nature. A long hike, listening to the birds soaking up the sun. That's my reset button.
I feel that.
But it could be anything you enjoy. Reading, curling up with a good book, spending time in the garden, whatever brings you joy. The key is to actually schedule it in. Treat it like an important appointment.
Don't let it get pushed aside, because those are the things that can really help you recharge. You know what else is super important? Mindfulness and relaxation techniques.
Oh, yeah. Helpguide.org and the Mental Health Foundation, they're all over that.
Things like yoga meditation, deep breathing exercises, even rhythmic exercise.
They can do wonders. They help calm your nervous system and quiet all those racing thoughts.
I've tried meditation before, and it's amazing how much calmer I feel afterward. But I think some people are intimidated by it.
I get that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be complicated. There's so many resources out there. Guided meditations online, yoga classes for all levels, even simple breathing exercises you can do at your desk.
Okay, that's good to know. So we've got movement connection, me time mindfulness. What about everyday habits? Things like diet and sleep.
Those are huge. Both helpguide.org and the Mental Health Foundation emphasize how important they are.
It's so easy to reach for that extra cup of coffee when you're stressed.
Yeah.
Or that sugary snack.
Right, but those things can actually make things worse.
They do.
They do. Caffeine and sugar can really mess with your blood sugar, which affects your energy levels and makes you feel even more jittery and anxious.
Makes sense.
And then there's alcohol. It might seem like it relaxes you at first, but it can disrupt your sleep and make you feel more anxious the next day.
It's a vicious cycle. So healthy food, plenty of sleep, and ditch the quick fixes. Got it. But there's one more piece of the puzzle we can't ignore.
Time management.
Yes. That never-ending to-do list can be the ultimate stressor. Helpguide.org has some good tips for managing that.
Like being realistic with your schedule. Don't try to cram a million things in at once, and then prioritize what absolutely needs to get done today and what can wait.
They also suggest breaking down big projects into smaller steps so it's not so overwhelming.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to delegate if you can.
Good point. Okay, so we've got all these great strategies, but what about those moments when stress hits you out of nowhere and you need relief, like right now?
Healthguide.org has a whole section called Quick Stress Relief.
Oh, tell me more.
It's all about using your senses to create a little escape.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Think about the things that make you feel calm and comforted, like looking at a favorite photo, smelling a nice scent like lavender, listening to calming music, even just hugging your pet.
It's like creating your own little oasis.
Exactly. And the best part is it's so personal. What works for one person might not work for another.
So find what works for you. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, but the Mental Health Foundation has this one amazing resource, a list of 101 ways to beat stress.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. So many creative and unexpected ideas.
Like cuddling a baby, hopefully, moving furniture around, practicing calligraphy.
It's a great reminder that there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
It's about finding what works for you and experimenting until you find your own stress-busting cocktail. But, as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, we've talked a lot about managing stress, but is there a difference between managing it and actually becoming more resilient? Can you use stress to your advantage?
That's a really good question. It kind of goes back to that idea of stress being like a call to action. Instead of seeing it as something you need to defeat, what if we saw it as a chance to learn and grow?
Okay, I like that. So how do we do that? How do we go from feeling totally overwhelmed to actually using it to our advantage?
Well, it starts with shifting your perspective. Stress is a natural part of life. It's your body's way of telling you that something needs attention. So instead of freaking out or trying to ignore it, we can ask ourselves, what's this stress trying to tell me?
So it's a signal, not a threat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Once you recognize that signal, you can choose how to respond. You can either let it control you, or you could use it as motivation to do something.
I like that. So instead of reaching for the junk food when I'm stressed, I can use that energy to go for a run or call a friend.
Exactly. You're choosing a healthier response.
Yeah.
And you're building resilience at the same time.
So we're not just managing stress, we're training ourselves to be more resilient.
Right. And the more you practice those healthy coping mechanisms, the stronger those resilience muscles get.
It's like anything else, the more you work at it, the better you get. So it's not about being stress-proof. It's about having a healthier relationship with stress.
Exactly.
Learning to ride the waves.
You got it.
And that takes us back to that Mental Health Foundation list, 101 Ways to Beat Stress.
It's such a great resource.
It really shows that there's no right way to deal with stress.
What works for one person might not work for another.
We talked about some of the funny ones, but there are so many great ideas in there. Spending time outdoors, connecting with people you love, listening to music, being creative.
And don't forget the basics. Getting enough sleep, eating well, moving your body.
Those are so important.
They really are.
So it sounds like building resilience is about taking a holistic approach.
It is.
Looking after your mind, body, and spirit.
Exactly. Creating a lifestyle that supports you.
Well, you've given me a lot to think about.
I'm glad.
We've explored stress from all angles and learned some really practical ways to manage it.
And hopefully you feel empowered to use it to your advantage.
I do. So to all our listeners out there, remember stress is a part of life, but it doesn't have to control you. Take what you've learned from this deep dive. Experiment, find what works for you, and build a more resilient life. You got this